Journey into America, The Challenge of Islam by Akbar Ahmed gives the reader an in-depth view of Islam in the United States of America and its continuous struggle over time. Ahmed begins the book by defining and analyzing American identity, by examining its history and growth. He then delves into the Muslim experience in America, discussing its diversity and challenges. Ahmed is an anthropologist who used nearly 2,000 questionnaires in his research of Muslim identity to gather much of the information found in this book. Ahmed expresses his belief that stereotypes and prejudices in the United States stem from the scant information and knowledge that both American Muslims and non-American Muslims have of one another. The book is separated into 3 parts: American identity, Islam in America, and adjusting and adapting. Each section aims to give the reader a deeper understanding of the topic by explaining Ahmed's travels, conversations, and interviews throughout America. Ahmed's book gives the reader an in-depth look into the complex experiences and challenges of American Muslims and their journey in the United States. In the first part of the book, American Identity, Ahmed breaks identity into 3 types: primordial identity, pluralist identity, and predator identity. Primordial identity refers to the first settlers at Plymouth and also is the basis for the other 2 identities. Pluralist identity is the notion that people can live in harmony together under laws while practicing their own individual faiths. Predator identity stems from the idea that individuals are entitled to land because God intended on them having it. Individuals use this entitlement as justification for violence and overall unfair treatment of weaker or fewer individuals not in the community. These 3 types of identity are used throughout the section to specifically recognize different American identities throughout history. Ahmed analyzes the historical and social aspects of American identity, outlining communities that struggle to define their own. He begins by discussing the oppressive history of the Native Americans. From Native Americans, Ahmed briefly analyzes the history of Catholic Americans through the heavy influx of Irish immigrants in the 19th century, and then focuses on African Americans and their historical struggle for not only an identity but for basic human rights. He also briefly discusses South Asians and Japanese historical issues of identity. He then reviews the presidency of John F. Kennedy and describes it as one of the most important presidencies in the history in the way that it supported pluralist identity. Ahmed then labels 9/11 as the reassertion of predator identity in the United States. Muslim immigrants who had been attracted to and invited in by American pluralists woke to find that they had tumbled from their comfortable positions in the professional middle class. Chapter 3 then delves deeper into American history by looking at its specific individuals across the United States. These people discuss their attitudes, values, and views on their own American identities and how they interact with one another with other American identities. Ahmed concludes that American identities interact differently with each other. He views primordial identity as accepting of Muslims as long as they strictly follow their primordial identity. Pluralist identity, that once accepted Muslims, now holds reservations, and predator identity, which inflicts many issues for Muslim Americans. The second part of the book is Islam in America, where Ahmed breaks that category into 3 chapters: African Americans as first Muslims, immigrant Muslims, and Muslim converts. A common theme throughout this part is that these diverse groups of Muslims are very complex and very different from one another. He compares immigrant Muslims to African American Muslims. Where Black Muslims had a strong sense of being American, immigrant Muslims felt that their community was under attack, especially post 9/11. He also points out that immigrant Muslims are the most diverse group because of their wide range of origin countries. Their connection to these countries can aid in building bridges with America, but as Ahmed states, America does not care for Islam. Muslim converts also play a unique role in building bridges between American identity and Muslims. American converts to Islam can help interpret American identity for Muslims and vice versa. The last part, Adjusting and Adapting, is also split into 3 different chapters: Jews and Muslims, Bridging a Great Divide, Mormons and Muslims, Getting to Know You, and the Importance of Being American. In regards to Jews and Muslims, Ahmed analyzes their history as 2 communities, the issues they face, and he suggests that by focusing on commonalities instead of differences, these 2 groups can begin to build a bridge. Mormons and Muslims are compared as two rapidly growing religious traditions in America. Mormons tend to have more sense of U.S. identity when compared to Muslims, which can be helpful if these communities do come together. Ahmed makes note to point that religiously these groups have much to discuss and debate, concluding that it may be better for them to define their relationship based on sociology rather than theology. In the final chapter, The Importance of Being American, Ahmed delves into various issues such as homegrown terrorism, Barack Obama's first year in office, and how Muslim Americans and non-Muslim Americans alike can move forward together. He believes that both communities need to have their voices heard within their own communities and in the media. America is at a crossroads to choose between an understanding of the Muslim community or to continue with post-9/11 stereotyping and prejudices. Howard Cohen, in his article America's Unique Constitutional Framework and the Fit of Islam, also labels America pre-9/11 with what would be a pluralist identity. He refers to Plymouth, like Ahmed did, and says that America is perhaps the one major nation on earth that was founded to provide refuge for religious tolerance. He then explains that America has such a complex ongoing history, and that although founded in the way it was, America continues to portray and talk about Muslims in the media, in politics, and elsewhere with great intolerance. Both authors talk in depth about the Founding Fathers and how they included Islam when creating the First Amendment, which allows the free exercise of religion. One interesting difference between Cohen and Ahmed is that Cohen perceives American identity as first and foremost, and following closely after is religious identity. In reference to American culture, Cohen states, "While we rejoice in our diversity, we have a right to require that all those who choose to live here must recognize that we will not sacrifice those values or that culture." Ahmed stressed the importance of harmony between the two concepts, working to discover a way that people can be both Muslim and American without having to sacrifice anything from either community. Ahmed also states the importance of dialogue and understanding instead of generalizing terms and values of Muslims, which are very often negatively constructed in the media. Zahid Shah similarly stresses how important knowledge and understanding are in the struggle of Islam in the United States. Shah compares jihad, or striving in the path of God, and terrorism, two terms that are often linked together in Western media, in the article Jihad and Terrorism, a comparative study. At the end of the article, Shah concludes that although the two terms are often generalized in ways that make them synonymous, they are in no way the same thing, stressing the importance of not generalizing and stereotyping without having an understanding. Ahmed aimed to humanize both American Muslims and non-American Muslims by writing this book. Through this goal, he hoped that it would be increasingly difficult for each community to be cruel and inflict pain on one another. Through the three parts of this book, American Identity, Islam in America, and Adjusting and Adapting, the reader will have an understanding of what it means to be American, what it means to be a minority American, specifically Muslim, how that has looked in the past, and how that will look in the future.